I stood there, my 6-month-old daughter crying in my arms, my cheek still stinging from where she struck me. The restaurant went silent. Everyone stared, but what that hostess didn't know was that the phone in my purse held one number that would change everything, including her entire future. Before we dive into this story, if you believe in standing up against discrimination and injustice, hit that subscribe button right now. This is a true story that needs to be heard, and your support helps make sure stories like mine don't get buried. Now, let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon. My name is Monique Thompson, and 3 years ago, I was a 28-year-old single mother just trying to make it through each day with some dignity intact. My daughter, Aaliyah, was 6 months old at the time, all chubby cheeks and curious brown eyes that looked at me like I hung the moon. She was, and still is, my entire world. Back then, I was working as a senior health inspector for the county, a position I'd worked incredibly hard to earn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was important work, and it gave me the power to make sure people were treated fairly and safely when they went out to eat. I'd recently moved to a nicer neighborhood, one with good schools for Aaliyah's future and tree-lined streets that felt safe, but moving meant starting over in a lot of ways. I didn't know anyone. I'd been living on takeout and frozen dinners for weeks because between work and taking care of a baby by myself, cooking felt impossible. So when Aaliyah got her first tooth, I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to feel like a normal person again, not just a tired mom in yoga pants covered in spit-up. I wanted to sit down at a real restaurant, eat food someone else cooked, and feel human. I chose Riverside Bistro. It was this beautiful place I'd driven past every day on my way to work, with big windows and flowers out front. It looked elegant but not stuffy, the kind of place where you could relax and enjoy a good meal. I called ahead and made a reservation for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right during Aaliyah's happiest window between naps. I even dressed nicely, put on a dress I hadn't worn since before pregnancy, did my hair, put on lipstick. I packed the diaper bag like I was planning a military operation, everything organized and ready. I was excited. I deserved this. When I walked through those doors at exactly 1 p.m., Aaliyah peaceful in my arms, I felt good. The restaurant was beautiful inside, all white tablecloths and soft jazz playing, the lunch crowd thin and quiet. I walked up to the hostess stand with a smile on my face, ready to finally enjoy myself. The woman standing there was in her mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back tight, name tag reading, Chelsea. The moment she looked up and saw me, her smile vanished like I'd flipped a switch. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone already cold enough to freeze water. "Yes, I have a reservation for one," I said pleasantly. "Thompson, 1 o'clock." She looked down at her book, flipping pages slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't see anything here." I felt the first flutter of unease in my stomach, but I stayed calm. "I made it 3 days ago. Spoke to someone on the phone. I have the confirmation email if you need to see it." Chelsea barely glanced at my phone when I pulled it up. "Well, it's not in our system. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the family restaurant down the street. They're more casual, better for, babies and things." The way she said it, that pause before babies, I knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't about Aaliyah. This was about me. About us. I watched as a white couple walked in behind me, no reservation, and Chelsea's smile reappeared like magic. "Right this way, folks," she said to them, leading them past me to a beautiful table by the window. I stood there, holding my baby, and something hardened in my chest. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't going to let this woman chase me away. When Chelsea came back, I was still standing there, and I'd pulled up my confirmation email with the date, time, and confirmation number clearly visible. "I have a reservation," I said again, my voice steady. "And if you can't find it, I'd like to speak with your manager." Something flickered in her eyes, calculation maybe, or annoyance. She looked down at her book again and suddenly, miraculously, found my name. "Oh, here it is. My mistake." No apology in her voice at all. "Follow me." She led me through the restaurant, past all the nice tables, past the window seats and the quiet corners, all the way to the back near the kitchen doors and right next to the bathroom, the worst table in the place. She slapped the menu down on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "Hope the baby won't disturb the other guests," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I looked her right in the eye. "She won't." "Thank you." I sat down, settling Aaliyah in my arms, refusing to let this woman see how much her treatment stung. I'd dealt with people like Chelsea my whole life, people who saw my skin color before they saw me, people who made assumptions about who I was, what I deserved, where I belonged, but I'd never let them win, and I wasn't about to start now. The server who came to take my order was kind, a young guy who smiled at Aaliyah and told me she was beautiful. I ordered a nice lunch, something I'd been looking forward to, and tried to relax. Aaliyah fell asleep in my arms, her little mouth slightly open, completely peaceful. I started to think maybe the worst was over. Maybe I could actually enjoy this. But Chelsea kept walking past my table, over and over again, staring at me, whispering to other staff members. I could feel her hostility like heat radiating from a fire. Other servers looked uncomfortable, shooting me apologetic glances when she wasn't looking. The young man who'd taken my order seemed especially bothered, but what could he do? She was the hostess, and from what I could tell, she'd been there longer than most of the staff. About 20 minutes in, Aaliyah woke up and started fussing. Not crying, just making those little hungry sounds babies make. I knew what she needed. I pulled out her bottle from the diaper bag, tested the temperature, and started feeding her right there at the table. She settled immediately, her little hands gripping the bottle, her eyes on mine. It was a peaceful moment, a mother feeding her child. There was nothing inappropriate about it. It was natural. It was beautiful. Chelsea appeared out of nowhere, looming over my table. "You can't do that here." I looked up at her calmly. "Excuse me?" "Feed the baby. You can't do that here. It's disturbing to other guests." I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm feeding my daughter. It's completely legal, and she's not disturbing anyone." "You need to go to the restroom if you're going to do that." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not feeding my baby in a bathroom. I have every right to feed her at my table." Chelsea's face flushed red. She spun around and marched off, and I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, a few minutes later she returned with the floor manager, a nervous-looking man named Brian according to his name tag. He looked embarrassed before Chelsea even opened her mouth. "Brian, she's refusing to follow restaurant policy," Chelsea started, but Brian held up his hand. "Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion," he said to me, not to Chelsea. "You're absolutely within your rights to feed your baby at your table. There's no policy against it." He turned to Chelsea. "She's done nothing wrong." I watched Chelsea's face turn from red to purple. Brian walked away to handle something at another table, and I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But Chelsea leaned down close to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, and whispered, "People like you always cause problems. People like you." There it was, out in the open. Aaliyah started crying then. Really crying, because babies can sense tension and fear and anger. She could feel my heart racing. I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to stay in this restaurant another minute. I hadn't even received my food yet, but I didn't care. My daughter didn't need to be in this environment, and neither did I. I stood up, shifting Aaliyah to one arm while I started gathering my things with the other hand. My diaper bag, my purse, trying to get everything together while holding a crying baby. As I stood, my diaper bag bumped the edge of the table. Nothing dramatic, just a small bump. Chelsea grabbed my arm, hard. Her fingers dug into my skin like claws. "You need to pay first." "I didn't get any food," I said, trying to pull my arm away. "Let go of me." "You ordered, you pay." She yanked my arm and I stumbled, clutching Aaliyah tighter to keep from dropping her. My baby's cries got louder, more frightened. "Let go of me right now," I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "If you touch me again, there will be consequences." She smirked, actually smirked. "What are you going to do about it?" I turned to walk away, done with this conversation, done with this woman, done with this entire situation. And that's when she did it. Chelsea slapped me across the face. Hard. The sound cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. My cheek exploded with pain. My ears rang. Aaliyah's screams filled the air. The entire restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze halfway to every mouth. Everyone stared. And I just stood there, my face burning, tears streaming down my cheeks, my baby wailing in my arms, and this woman standing there with her hand still raised like she might hit me again. Brian came running from across the restaurant. Other diners were pulling out their phones. An older woman at a nearby table stood up, her face horrified. "She hit her," the woman said loudly. "That hostess just hit her." I was shaking, my whole body trembling, but I didn't move. I stood there, and I looked Chelsea right in her eyes. Brian was yelling at Chelsea, telling her she was fired effective immediately to get her things and leave. Chelsea started screaming, making excuses, saying I'd been aggressive, saying I'd threatened her, saying anything she could think of to justify what she'd done, but I stayed quiet. I focused on Aaliyah first, bouncing her gently, whispering that everything was okay, that Mama was here, that she was safe. Another diner had already called the police. Brian was apologizing over and over, saying everything would be comped, saying the owner would want to speak with me, saying Chelsea would never work in food service again if he had anything to say about it. That's when I reached into my purse. I pulled out my wallet, and from it I pulled out my county health inspector credentials. Brian's apologies died in his throat. His face went completely white. "I'm the senior health inspector for this county," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the tears still on my face. "Every restaurant in this district reports to my office." Chelsea, who'd been gathering her things while cursing under her breath, froze. She turned slowly to look at me, and I watched the realization dawn on her face like the sun coming up on the worst day of her life. I pulled out my phone and made one single call to my supervisor. I explained, in a calm and professional voice, that I'd just been physically assaulted at Riverside Bistro while attempting to dine there with my infant daughter. I requested an immediate emergency inspection of the establishment. My supervisor, who I'd worked with for 5 years and who trusted my judgment completely, agreed without hesitation. An inspection team would be there within the hour. Then I made a second call, this one to our office database manager. I requested that Chelsea Bradford's name be flagged in our employment system. Any restaurant that hired her would be marked for additional scrutiny and more frequent inspections. It was perfectly legal, perfectly within my authority, and perfectly justified given that she'd just committed assault on county property during business hours. Chelsea heard every word. I made sure of it. I watched her face as she understood what I was doing, what this meant for her. She started begging. Actually begging. "Please, I have bills. I need to work. I can't afford to lose this job. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it." I looked at her. This woman who'd judged me from the moment I walked in, who'd treated me like I was less than human, who'd put her hands on me while I held my baby, and I said, "You should have thought about that before you assaulted me and my child." The police arrived. I gave my statement. Multiple witnesses gave theirs. 3 people had video on their phones. It was open and shut. Chelsea was charged with assault. The health inspection team arrived while I was still giving my statement, and because I'd already been in the restaurant for over an hour, I'd noticed things. The hand-washing station near the kitchen wasn't properly stocked. The temperature logs hadn't been filled out correctly. There were critical violations that required the restaurant to temporarily close. Chelsea lost her job that day. The assault charge meant she couldn't get hired at any restaurant in the county because my office flagged her. Word spread on social media because those diners posted their videos. Chelsea became infamous overnight, not famous, infamous. She couldn't show her face anywhere. Eventually, I heard she had to leave the area entirely, moved 3 states away, and ended up working retail. Could I have sued the restaurant? Absolutely. Could I have gotten them shut down permanently? Probably. But that's not who I am. The owner flew in from out of state the next day, mortified by what had happened. We had a long conversation. He implemented changes, mandatory diversity training for all staff, new management structure, clear policies about discrimination, and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind. I worked with them, not against them. They deserved a chance to be better. But here's what that day taught me. It wasn't just about me and Chelsea, it was about every Black mother who's been treated like she doesn't belong. Every woman who's been told to feed her baby in a bathroom. Every person who's been judged before they even opened their mouth. Chelsea thought she had power because of where she worked, because of how she looked, because of assumptions she made about who I was. She never imagined that the tired-looking Black woman with a baby in her arms had any power at all. That's the thing about assumptions. They'll destroy you every single time. I look at Aaliyah now, 3 years old, smart as a whip, and full of questions about everything. I think about the world I'm raising her in, and I think about that day. I could have stayed silent. I could have just left and never gone back. But silence doesn't protect us. Silence doesn't change anything. I had a voice, and I had power, and I used both, not for revenge, for accountability. There's a difference. 3 years later, Aaliyah is thriving, and I'm still doing the work I love. That restaurant? They're now one of the most inclusive establishments in our county, with a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Chelsea? I heard she moved 3 states away and works in retail now. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been judged, dismissed, or mistreated because of who you are, drop a comment below. Share your story. Let's build a community that refuses to stay silent. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. These stories need to be told. Our voices need to be heard. And to every mother out there, every person who's been made to feel less than, you are worthy. You are powerful. And sometimes all it takes is one call to change everything. Thank you for listening to my story.